Hi, my name is Drew. I'm a student pilot, and this is my journey. Come along with me as I finish my flight training in Phoenix, Arizona. So today I'm going to go ahead and cover weeks 21, 22, 23, and 24. Pretty exciting because this does take me through to the end of my private, including my check ride. So all of these weeks kind of build off of each other and deal with each other. So I figured it would probably just be best to do one video that encompasses all of them. So jumping in, day one, I was scheduled for my EOC flight. I ended up going since the winds were a little bit more favorable than my previous attempts, even though they were still not great. I managed to pass most of the flight, but on ground reference. Two of the ground reference maneuvers we have to do are turns around a point, where you have to make a perfect circle around a stationary object like a tree or a house. And then S turns, where you have to fly a perfect S across a straight line with your wings being level over that said line. Both of these maneuvers help us to learn to correct for winds. As I was setting up to do these maneuvers on my EOC, I noticed that the flight display showed that the winds were 20 to 30 knots, higher than I had ever practiced these maneuvers in. I knew they weren't going to be great, but I still gave it my best shot. I learned that day to stick to my personal minimums and not fly if I'm uncomfortable with the weather, even if I'm feeling pressured to fly. So after unsetting on those, I went back to my instructor to practice them again on day two. I was scheduled for back on EOC day 3, but canceled due to weather. The winds were high and I didn't want to repeat what happened on my last EOC attempt. I wasn't scheduled for day 4, but reattempted my EOC flight day 5. I passed turns around a point, but unset again for S turns. Since we had time, I opted to fly them a few more times with this instructor to see if he had any advice for me. He ended up saying something that just made it click, and I realized that I'd been thinking about them all wrong. Basically, I was just taking turns around a point, which is a perfect circle, and just trying to move it and do like half turns around a point, which is not what that maneuver is for at all. And then after the flight, as we were walking back, he said something else that got me thinking. He had asked if I was still having fun. I thought about it and realized that I'd become so focused on passing EOC that I stopped having fun while flying. This really helped me get my head back in the game and refocus on what I came here to do. I was off on day 6 before doing another remedial with my instructor on day 7. With this flight, I decided to have a little fun with it. My instructor mentioned in the past how they don't really get to fly that much after becoming instructors, so I made her fly me out to the practice area. After we got there, I took the controls, did my maneuvers, did them 2 or 3 times just to prove that I could do it before letting her take the controls back and fly us back home. It was nice to play passenger for a minute and just relax and enjoy the flight. She had mentioned how they never really get to fly, and then I mentioned how once we start flying, we don't really get to like enjoy it and just sit there. So it was nice to kind of trade that off a little bit for that day. Moving into week 22, the only thing I had this week was my EOC flight day 2. This flight was with one of my flight leads, Kirk. I was a little nervous, since typically it's not a good thing if you get paired with your flight lead for a flight unless they are your instructor. Regardless, I didn't let that get to me, and I doubled down and really made sure I gave it my best. We took off, flew to the practice area, I did my S turn, and he said, "Good job." And at that point, I panicked because the flight was so short, and I asked, do we go back now? Of course we did, and in the debrief, he said I was a damn good pilot. That was a win, and I could have cried from happiness hearing that after struggling so much to get here. And with that, I was on my check ride wait. Week 23, this week I got scheduled for my check ride, which is happening next week. Since it would have been more than 8 days since I flew last, I got some refreshers to make sure I was ready to go. This week had me doing it all with my instructor to make sure that knowledge was still there on day 7, and that was basically all I did this week. Week 24. This week I continued my refreshers in preparation for my check ride. Day 1, I did a sim. It's hard to do maneuvers and takeoffs and landings in it, but it helps shake off the cobwebs with my flows and my checklist. Day 2, I had a flight. I focused on some of the things I felt less confident about. I was off day 3, but opted for another remedial flight on day 4 to brush up even more. Day 5 was my check ride day. I passed and officially became a licensed pilot. It was such a relief to finally be here. That night I partook in celebrating my accomplishments. I was off day 6, but day 7 saw my first day of instrument training. Now I get to learn to fly when I can't see outside. This first mission was just a sim. just getting used to flying with sole reference to the instruments. A new course came with a new instructor, so this was our first time together. It was pretty exciting to jump into something new. And that is the end of week 24 and the official conclusion of my journey through private. Thanks so much for joining along on my journey. I appreciate it.